They didn't ask her name. No polite greeting. No courteous verification of her boarding pass. Just two security officers moving with purpose toward one woman standing quietly in the first-class line. A black woman. She held her phone in hand, digital boarding pass clearly visible on the screen. But the airline employee at the counter didn't glance at it. He simply said, "Ma'am, step aside." 4 words. Sharp. Final. Like a verdict. The people around her didn't react in surprise. Their silence wasn't disbelief, it was agreement. She didn't look like she belonged in seat 1A. Not with that deep brown skin. Not with the quiet grace she carried. Not with her simple sneakers and a canvas bag. Not with her calm. What no one knew. Not the gate agent. Not the security staff. Not the man who had just walked past her without so much as showing ID. Was that Amara Lewis hadn't just paid for a first-class seat. She held something far more powerful. That morning, Amara had arrived early. She had taken care to blend in, wearing faded jeans, an old hoodie, and tying back her curls in a loose bun. Her shoes were worn but clean. Her bag, plain. She looked like any other weary traveler, which was exactly the point. This wasn't just a trip. It was a test. Behind her presence was a directive and assignment from the board of Monarch Equity Group, the multi-billion-dollar firm that held the final vote on whether Skybridge Airlines would receive the $4 billion merger it desperately needed. And Amara? She was the one who held that vote. Her mission was to observe, not from a boardroom, but from the front line. "We want to see how they treat someone they don't think matters," the chairman had said. "Someone they assume has no power." And so she watched, quietly, as Brandon Hale, the sharply dressed gate agent with his golden name tag and cold smile, leaned toward his colleague and muttered something. Then he gave a quick nod toward security. Within seconds, 2 officers approached her. "Step out of the line, please," one of them said with mechanical authority. "We need to run a quick check." "Is there an issue?" Amara asked, her voice even, unshaken. "Just following protocol," the officer replied flatly. The murmurs behind her began. Whispers. Glances. Judgments. Brandon folded his arms, satisfied. He'd done his job. Kept first class, tidy. Amara didn't argue. She didn't flinch. She stepped aside. Let them scan. Let them ask their questions. She waited. She knew exactly how far this would go. Because it wasn't the first time. They scanned her barcode. First class. Verified. But they didn't apologize. Instead, one officer glanced at Brandon, who offered only a half shrug, refusing to meet Amara's eyes. "Ma'am, you're free to rejoin the line," the officer said. She walked forward. Not triumphant. Not bitter. Just steady. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that their treatment of her had just rewritten the terms of the merger. She boarded quietly. Found her seat, 1A, and settled in. Through the window, the sky opened wide. But her thoughts stayed grounded. Across the aisle, the head flight attendant, Clarice Vaughn, was already moving through the cabin with polished grace. Perfect makeup. Designer heels. Smile bright and warm for every passenger but one. When she reached Amara's row, her smile vanished. She moved past her as if she wasn't even there. No towel. No menu. No greeting. Nothing. It wasn't an accident. It was intentional. Amara raised her hand. "Excuse me," she said politely. "I haven't received a warm towel like the other passengers." Clarice blinked, then forced a tight smile. "Oh, I thought you didn't want one," she said. "I'll be back shortly." She wasn't. Amara said nothing. But she took note. This wasn't about towels. It was about subtle rejection. The kind that slices clean, without ever raising a voice. Clarice had grown up on the edge of affluence. All her life, she dreamed of being inside the world of polished metal and glass. She earned her way up the airline hierarchy, becoming the face of first-class service. And in doing so, she internalized the hierarchy she worked in. She knew who was welcome, and who wasn't. And Amara? Amara didn't fit. Later, when the beverage service began, Clarice returned, briefly. She placed a drink on Amara's tray. Lukewarm water. In a plastic cup. No ice. No garnish. Not the sparkling mineral water other guests were sipping from crystal glasses. "Thank you," Amara said softly. Clarice didn't respond. The next blow came not from Clarice, but from the passenger beside her. "I don't get it," he muttered to no one in particular. "How does someone like her end up in first class?" Gerald Whitman. Mid-50s. Silver hair. Rolex. Self-satisfaction in human form. "I've flown for years," he added. "Never seen someone like that in this cabin." A few passengers chuckled. Clarice joined in with an almost whispered response. She probably used points. It wasn't just cruelty. It was performance. A quiet play staged for everyone around her, designed to remind Amara that she was an outsider. But Amara didn't raise her voice. She turned calmly to Gerald and said, "I don't think the price of a seat should determine the level of respect a person deserves." "Do you?" Gerald blinked. Clarice stepped back. The temperature in the cabin dropped, not from cold air, but from clarity. That moment could have passed, but it didn't. Because Clarice returned minutes later, holding her tablet, face pinched with fake professionalism. "Miss Lewis," she said, "we've had a change in the cabin weight distribution. We'll need to move you to economy." The lie was weak. The motive was clear. Amara didn't hesitate. "I paid for this seat in full," she said. "I don't believe it's necessary to move me." Clarice stiffened. "It's a matter of safety." "Then I trust," Amara replied, "that a solution exists which doesn't involve targeting the only person who seems inconvenient to you." Clarice's mask cracked. Just for a second. Then she turned and left. But the moment had already sealed her fate. When the plane landed, 2 officers boarded before anyone could disembark. They approached Amara. "Miss Lewis," one said coldly, "we need you to come with us." Accusations of disruptive behavior. A report from Clarice. A statement from Gerald. Amara didn't resist. She followed them quietly into a private room. And when they demanded an explanation, she didn't argue. She reached into her bag and slid a navy blue envelope across the table. Inside, a letter of authorization. Signed. Stamped. Amara Lewis, Chief Strategic Officer, Monarch Equity Group. Final vote holder on Skybridge's $4 billion merger. The officers read it. Then read it again. Panic set in. Within minutes, phones were ringing across terminals. Eric Dempsey, head of airport security, received a call from Monarch's legal team. "You've made a critical error," the voice said. And Eric? He had no defense. Because the truth was undeniable. The woman they had dismissed, ignored, embarrassed, was the woman who held the future of their company. And she hadn't raised her voice once. By the time Skybridge's CEO, Leonard Westbrook, called the airport, the damage was irreversible. "You detained our merger vote?" he barked over the phone. "You humiliated her?" Eric stammered. "We didn't recognize her." "You didn't need to recognize her," Westbrook thundered. "You needed to treat her like a human being." The fallout was swift. Brandon Hale was suspended pending review. Clarice Vaughn was demoted, stripped of her elite routes. An internal audit was launched. But the real consequence wasn't punishment. It was change. Because now the entire company knew. They had built a culture of quiet cruelty. And one woman's silence had exposed it all. Weeks later, Amara returned to the terminal. She passed through security with the same grace. Same hoodie. Same curls. Same calm. Only this time, everyone saw her differently. Including Clarice. They crossed paths in a quiet corridor. Clarice paused. Amara didn't. But just before she walked past, she stopped. Looked her in the eyes. And said, "You were right. I didn't belong in first class." Clarice blinked. Confused. But Amara finished the sentence. "I was there to buy the entire airline." And with that, she walked on. No applause. No entourage. Just purpose. And the quiet, unmistakable power of being exactly who she was, seen, heard, and now remembered.